My name is Gray. This happened 6 years ago when my girlfriend and I were both 19. One evening, she texted me asking for a big favor. Her parents were out for the night, and she was buried under a mountain of homework. She asked if I could take her 10-year-old brother, Dean, to the local baseball field for his night game and bring him home afterward. Dean and I got along great, so I said yes right away. I picked him up a little early so we could make it before the game started at 7. The baseball field was in a very isolated spot. You had to park your car in an open dirt lot and then walk for about 5 minutes down a trail through a thick forest to reach the field. During the day, the path was fine, but at night, it was a completely different story. The game lasted much longer than expected because it went into extra innings. By the time it ended, the sky was pitch black. Most families had already headed home, and only a few people were left. Dean had to stay behind for a few minutes to talk to his coach about next week's practice schedule, so we were the very last ones to leave the field. Suddenly, the stadium lights shut off on an automatic timer. Everything around us was swallowed by thick, heavy darkness. We started walking onto the forest trail. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. Dean walked right next to me, but he was unusually quiet. He was usually a very talkative kid, but right now, he didn't say a single word. About halfway down the path, Dean suddenly stopped. He squeezed my arm hard and pointed ahead. "Gray, do you see that?" he whispered. I squinted my eyes to see. Even though it was dark, I could make out a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still in the middle of the trail. The person stood there like a wooden statue. Then, with a sudden and eerily smooth movement, the shadow slipped into the bushes on the left side. My heart skipped a beat. To keep Dean from panicking, I pretended I didn't see anything. "It's nothing. You're just seeing things. Let's keep moving," I said. We kept walking, but I swear I heard the sound of leaves rustling right beside us. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of someone moving through the brush, keeping pace with us. I gripped Dean's hand and told him to walk faster. Finally, we made it out to the parking lot. But when I reached into my pocket, my heart dropped. I realized I had lost my keys. I searched every single pocket, but the keys were gone. I must have dropped them in the bleachers. I thought about going back to look for them, but the idea of leaving Dean alone in the middle of a dark parking lot terrified me. While I was hesitating, Dean grabbed my sleeve. He pointed a shaking finger toward the trail, his voice breaking. "Gray, look." I turned around. Under the faint glow of my phone light at the edge of the path, that man was standing there, staring right at us. He wasn't hiding anymore. He stood there, blocking the only path back to the baseball field. "It will be faster to walk home. It's only about 15 minutes. We'll stay on the streets with lights," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We started walking along the main road. I held Dean's hand tight. We walked very fast, but I tried not to run. I knew that in the dark, running might trigger a predator's instinct to chase. I glanced back. The man was still standing there, motionless. When I looked back a second time, he had started moving. He was following us, keeping a steady distance behind. Under the bright orange glow of the streetlights, I could see him clearly. He was very tall, very thin, and he was fiddling with something metal in his hand. The light reflected off a long, sharp knife blade. I squeezed Dean's hand tighter, my heart racing. Suddenly, the man started making strange noises. It wasn't a scream. It was a series of choked, trembling moans like an injured animal. The sound grew louder and more frantic. "Gray," Dean whispered, his voice shaking violently. "Keep walking fast, but don't run," I said. I was panicking inside, but I had to stay calm for him. We sped up, and so did he. The distance between us didn't change. His moaning became louder and more crazed. As we turned onto the final stretch of road toward my girlfriend's house, we heard heavy footsteps behind us. He was charging at us at full speed. "Run!" I yelled. We ran for our lives. The footsteps were getting closer. The moaning had turned into a wild growl. I didn't dare look back for even a second. My girlfriend's house was right in front of us. We jumped onto the sidewalk and dove into the bushes next to the front door. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type. I texted her, "Open the door now, emergency." The footsteps stopped at the end of the driveway. I hid behind the bushes, hugging Dean close and putting my hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. Through the leaves, I saw the man standing in the middle of the street. He was turning his head back and forth, searching for us. The streetlight showed his face. He was pale, his eyes were wide and bulging, and his mouth was hanging open as he continued to moan. The front door swung open and light poured out. Dean and I bolted from the bushes and scrambled up the porch steps. I slammed the door shut and turned all 3 locks. My girlfriend stood there, looking completely confused until she saw the sheer terror on our faces. "Call the police," I gasped, breathless from exhaustion. Looking out the window, the man was still in the middle of the street. He was pacing in circles, moaning and still clutching the knife. He even started frantically kicking over the neighbors' trash cans. The police arrived quickly, but the man had already disappeared into the shadows of the neighborhood. They searched the area but found no trace of him. They took our statements and promised to patrol the area more often. The next morning, I went back to the baseball field with a few friends. We found my keys wedged in a gap between the wooden boards of the bleachers. As I held the cold metal keys in my hand, a horrifying thought hit me. If I had actually had my keys last night and tried to unlock the car, he might have attacked me while I was distracted at the door. Or worse, he might have been waiting in the back seat. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. But whenever I remember the sound of him chasing us, my heart still pounds with that same paralyzing fear. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
I am Nathan. When I was 10, I had the most memorable Halloween of my life. The morning of the 31st, I woke up with a high fever, almost 104 degrees. My mom put her hand on my forehead, shook her head, and told me I needed to rest. "But I want to go trick-or-treating," I promised my friends. I looked at my vampire costume hanging on the chair. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," Mom said. She tried to comfort me that there would be other Halloweens, but for a kid, waiting is never easy. I spent the whole day in bed, my body tired and aching. I felt helpless, listening to the sound of my friends shouting happily outside. As evening came, our doorbell kept ringing with trick or treat. Kids were coming to our house for candy. I figured my friends were gathering to go trick-or-treating too. I pulled the blankets over my head, feeling a sting in my nose, but tried to sleep so I wouldn't hear, wouldn't know anything else. I don't know what time it was, but I opened my eyes and the fever had broken. My body felt much lighter. But when I checked the clock, it was past 11 p.m. I sat up with a sigh and looked out the window. The streets were silent. Only the Halloween decorations' lights were dimly shining. Halloween was over. My heart felt heavy. I got out of bed and walked over to where my vampire costume was hanging. I had put so much effort into it. I figured I would wear it just to make it worth something. I put the cape over my shoulders, clipped the fangs into my mouth, and put on the hat. I looked at myself in the mirror, trying to smile, but only felt sadder. As I stood in front of the mirror, something flew past the window. It was so fast I only managed to catch a black streak. I turned my head to look out. Nothing. I figured my eyes were just tired from the fever, but a few seconds later, the dark shape reappeared. This time, I saw it more clearly. It flashed by with a shrieking sound, like the painful breath of an animal. My heart started pounding fast. I stood still for a few seconds to watch more before slowly stepping toward the window. Outside was the familiar neighborhood scene. Nothing unusual. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to look out without daring to open the window all the way. I sighed in relief, ready to turn around, when suddenly something jumped onto the roof of a car parked nearby. I jumped, screaming while stumbling backward. It was a very tall creature. Its head was large, tilted to one side. In the darkness, I could only see pitch black outlines with bumpy, lumpy details all over its body. It wasn't standing still, but writhing, its body contracting and then stretching out. Its mouth was wide open, emitting a sound like a moan mixed with a stifled scream. I wanted to run, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. My mind was blank, so terrified, but unable to take my eyes off the thing outside. It was a demon, a real demon. Then it turned its head and looked at me. Its two deep, black eye sockets were like bottomless pits. My mouth was dry. I couldn't utter a word. Then what I saw was even more terrifying. It smiled. That distorted face broke into a smile wide to its ears, its sharp teeth glinting in the dark. It was a smile of delight, as if it had just found a new toy. It seemed to be trying to get to me. Its movements were nothing like how a human moves. It started to crawl closer to my room window. Its head was still tilted, its eyes still fixed on me. I felt a warm stream run down my legs. I had peed my pants, but my entire body still couldn't move. The demon was getting closer and closer. Now I could clearly see every detail on its body. Wrinkled skin, jagged spikes growing out, blood dripping from its lips. It put a hand on the glass. 5 long fingers with curved claws. Next, its disgusting face pressed close against the pane, and it smiled again. The scream burst from my throat with all my strength. I screamed continuously, non-stop. A few seconds later, I heard feet running heavily down the hallway. My door flew open and my parents rushed in. "Nathan, what is it?" Mom hugged me, and I could only point a trembling finger toward the window. I stammered, unable to form words. Dad looked outside, his face pale. The demon was still there. Now, under the light of my room, it was clearer. It wasn't still, but jumping around excitedly. Its mouth was wide open, signaling something. Its hands were waving wildly, pointing toward our front door, and then pointing behind itself. Mom hugged me tighter, and Dad stared out. Silence lasted a few seconds. Then Dad frowned. "Wait a minute." Dad stepped closer to the window, leaning in to observe. The creature kept frantically waving its hands, but now I realized its actions looked more like it was pleading for help than threatening. Dad opened the window a small crack and asked, "Are you in trouble?" The creature nodded frantically, then pointed behind itself. Dad looked in that direction and burst out laughing. Mom and I just looked at each other, confused. Dad opened the window, and the creature immediately leapt inside. As soon as it was in, it fell to the floor, panting. Mom and I stood watching the scene before us, utterly bewildered. I heard a loud dog bark, and when I looked back toward the window, I saw a pit bull standing there and barking fiercely. My dad asked what was wrong, and the creature slowly sat up. It raised its hands and pulled off the rubber mask. Underneath the mask was a young man, face bright red, sweating buckets. He was gasping for air. "Thank you. Thank you so much." His voice was trembling. I stood there with the most surprised look on my face. His costume was truly incredible. "That dog has been chasing me since the beginning of the street," he explained, wiping his sweat. "I was in a costume contest at a nearby pub. On my way back, it just jumped out of nowhere. I ran for a long time, climbed onto a few cars, but it kept chasing me. I saw your light was on, so I tried to call for help. Sorry for disturbing your family." Mom released me, sighing in relief. "Oh my God, thank goodness it was just a person." Dad poured the young man a glass of water. "Did you make this costume yourself?" "It really looks terrifying." He nodded, forcing a smile. "I worked on it for 3 months. I guess I went a little overboard." He looked over at me, still standing frozen. "I'm sorry, kid." "I didn't mean to scare you." I couldn't answer. Watching him sit there, the demon costume hanging loosely on him, I suddenly felt like laughing. The thing that had scared me so badly I peed my pants was just a guy running away from a pit bull. After the pit bull was taken away by its owner, the young man thanked my family and left. I changed my clothes and sat on my bed, looking at the demon mask he had given me. I was still shaking a little, but this time not from fear, but from excitement. The fever was gone, and I was holding the most unexpected Halloween gift, a terrifyingly realistic homemade mask. I had missed trick-or-treating with my friends, but instead, I had a Halloween night no one could have imagined. A night when a demon knocked on my window to escape a dog. I kept the mask safe and promised myself I would be healthy enough to never miss another Halloween night. But it wasn't until I was 16 that I finally grew into that mask. My name is Alvin. I work at a distribution center about a 40-minute drive from my house. The job is backbreaking, and my shift usually ends at 2 a.m. If you've ever driven home at that hour in the middle of February, you know how lonely the roads can get. This happened 3 years ago during a brutal winter. It had been snowing since noon, and by the time I clocked out, the roads were a mess. My car was old and didn't handle well in the snow, so I had to drive slowly. The radio that night reported a semi-truck had flipped over, blocking both lanes of the highway I usually take. I was exhausted, my back was aching, and I just wanted to get home, so I decided to take a shortcut. This route cut through miles of farmland and thick woods. At 2 a.m. in the winter, there was nothing but a black void. I'd been driving for about 20 minutes. The heater was blasting at full power, but I was still shivering. The blowing snow made it hard to see anything beyond the reach of my headlights. That's when I saw something on the right shoulder, a lump sticking out of a snowbank. As I got closer, I realized the shape was a person. It looked like a man lying face down, half buried in the snow. My first thought was that he had likely been in an accident. I slowed down and looked around for a wrecked car, but the ditch was pretty deep, so it could have been hidden. I pulled over on the opposite side of the road and rolled down my window. "Hey!" I yelled, but the person didn't move. I shifted the car into park but kept the engine running. I went to call 911, but I had no signal. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove box and stepped out into the cold. "Hey, can you hear me?" I shouted again as I walked toward him. I was about 10 feet away when the man suddenly moved. He didn't groan or struggle to get up like an injured person would. He sat straight up, almost like he had popped up on a spring. When he turned to look at me, I noticed he was fairly young, maybe in his 20s. He wasn't wearing gloves, he wasn't shivering, and his face wasn't pale from the cold. Instead, it was flushed and full of life. "Help! My leg! I think it's broken!" he screamed. I stopped in my tracks because his voice was incredibly loud and steady, not shaking at all. More importantly, his eyes were locked onto my car behind me. "Where's your car?" "Were you in a wreck?" I asked, taking a step back. "It's in the woods," he yelled, pointing vaguely into the darkness behind him without even looking. "Come help me up. I can't walk." My suspicion was growing by the second. I took another step back toward my car. "I'm going to drive up the road to find a signal and call an ambulance for you." The man's face changed instantly. He looked furious. "Just get over here and help me," he barked. Then I saw it. Deep in the trees behind him, my headlights caught a reflection off of something metal. The next second, two dark figures charged out of the brush. The man in the snow scrambled to his feet and lunged at me. The two others sprinted toward the road to surround me. I spun around and bolted. My boots were slipping on the ice, and I almost fell face first. I dove into my car, and just as I grabbed the handle to slam the door, my hand smacked hard against the glass. The man from the snow was right there. He grabbed the door frame, trying to yank it back open. At that range, I could see he was grinning ear to ear. I used every bit of my strength to slam the door shut and immediately hit the lock button. The other two reached the car. One started yanking violently on the passenger door handle. The other was trying to smash the back window with something heavy, maybe a tire iron or a large rock. I floored the gas pedal. The guy on my side started punching the glass, screaming obscenities. The car lurched forward, and I nearly hit the man on the driver's side as he jumped back. I straightened the wheel and pushed the gas to the floor. I didn't stop until I reached a state police barracks. I ran inside like a madman, shaking and gasping for air. I told the officer everything. They immediately dispatched a patrol car to the location. They didn't catch them. By the time the police arrived, they were gone. But the officer told me later what they found. There were multiple sets of footprints in the snow, and behind the trees, right where those two men had been hiding, they found a pile of heavy rocks and a coil of rope. The officer told me straight up that they weren't just trying to carjack me. If they just wanted the car, they would have pulled me out and driven off. The rope suggested they wanted to take me with them, or tie me up and leave me in the woods to freeze to death. Since that night, I never take shortcuts. If I ever see someone lying in the snow again, I'll call 911, but I'm keeping the car moving. It might sound cold, but the look on that man's face that night killed my sense of charity.
Someone wrote a message on the bathroom mirror while I was living alone. I'm Carrie, 31 years old. I'm really independent. When I turned 18, I moved out to start living on my own and be independent. At first, I stayed in a rundown mobile home that my cousin lent me. I worked 2 jobs at the same time. I was a waitress during the day and a bartender at night. I went a different route compared to my friends who were the same age. Everyone else went to college and then looked for a job. But I decided to earn money first, find a comfortable place to live, and then either go to college or stick with the job I was doing. After 4 years of working hard, I saved up some money. I rented a small house to gradually improve my quality of life. The house I rented belongs to Mr. Robbie, who's 56 years old. The house is pretty close to the center. There were quite a few things that needed fixing in the house, but I was able to tackle them while I was moving in. I also spent quite a bit on furniture. The biggest expense was the wardrobe for the bedroom. I was hoping Uncle Robbie would have one and leave it for me, but I was a bit disappointed. My budget was almost gone, but I had my own house. I was still working 2 jobs and was constantly busy, coming and going late. Even though I had a nice house, I was only home for about 5 to 6 hours a day. One night, I came home at 11 p.m. feeling awful. I usually came home around that time, but that day, on top of my usual fatigue, my feet were sore from standing for hours. All I wanted to do was soak in the tub. When I entered the bathroom, I paused for a few seconds as the hot steam surrounded me, and I noticed some wet spots on the floor. I guessed that someone from the construction team had used the toilet, but why didn't they use the one in the living room? I thought to myself as I walked over to the bathtub and turned on the water. When I went back to the bedroom to get my pajamas, I stopped in front of a large mirror. Let's talk a bit about the bathroom design in my room. It would have been fine if there wasn't a huge mirror in there. It was 1.5 times taller than me and wider than my arm's length. I wondered why Uncle Robbie needed such a huge mirror in the bathroom. I also thought about redesigning the mirror in the bathroom, but couldn't get to it yet, since I needed to prioritize other areas. Back to that evening. What made me space out for a few minutes was the message written in steam on the mirror. I can see you. I figured it was someone from the construction team who wrote it. He seemed like the funny type. I wiped the words away and quickly got back to relaxing. About a week later, all the repairs and construction in the house were finished. Seeing the final results, I felt proud and a bit emotional. I finally had a comfortable bedroom to come home to after long, tiring work hours. A safe and secure parking spot. These things motivated me to work even harder. One morning, I walked into the bathroom still half asleep. With my eyes half closed, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my teeth. When I washed my face, I suddenly got startled. Have a nice day. Are you ignoring me? My nerves instantly went on high alert. I looked around the bathroom and bedroom, then ran down to check the kitchen and living room. I checked all the doors in the house. The main door and the back door had been completely replaced, and the windows had new locks. They were all still locked and showed no signs of tampering. I was sure I'd kept them locked since I wasn't home very often. With a baseball bat in hand, I checked every nook and cranny of the house to see if someone might be hiding. In fact, there was nowhere to hide in the small house, and I couldn't find anyone or anything suspicious. I pulled out my phone and called Uncle Robbie to ask if there were any other entrances to the house. Do you mean rats? No, I mean a human passageway. Uncle Robbie assured me firmly that there were no other entrances. Maybe the construction workers left it there just to mess with you. I thought the same thing after seeing that the furniture was still intact and tidy. There was no sign of any disturbance or intrusion in the house. I put it aside, and everything went on as usual for the next week, until that fateful night when I woke up to go to the bathroom. Another line appeared on the mirror, and this time, it wasn't just a message. I will haunt you. I reacted strongly and called Uncle Robbie again, even though it was already midnight. It wasn't until the third call that he finally answered. Without letting him speak, I bombarded him with questions about the mirror in the bathroom. Do you remember me telling you about the special arrangement of things in the bedroom? Uncle Robbie's words surprised me. Had I missed something? There's going to be a large wardrobe in the bathroom instead of the bedroom. But I don't see a wardrobe, just a huge mirror. I told Uncle Robbie and pushed the mirror. It suddenly moved, like a door opening, and behind it was indeed a large, dark wardrobe. When the glass opened wide, I was startled to see a man's face. His hair was messy, his eyes were wide open, and his mouth was grinning widely. The darkness of the wardrobe seemed to swallow his body, making it look like a floating head was smiling at me. I screamed as loud as I could, and on the phone, I could hear Uncle Robbie's anxious voice calling my name. I rushed out of the house, hid in the car, locked the doors, and called the police. The police found the strange man still hiding in there. In the wardrobe were a few personal belongings, some canned food, and household items that I thought I had lost. The man didn't explain or answer any questions from the police. He was sometimes sullen and fierce, and other times cheerful and smiling. After that traumatic event, I continued to live in the house for about a year. I'm now living in a more complete apartment, studying for a university degree, and managing a restaurant. I always feel lucky that the intruder was just a man who wasn't in his right mind, and not some cold-blooded murderer. My roommate intends to kill me. I am Baron, living in a small house with 2 bedrooms. I posted an ad looking for someone to share the rent with. Even though I don't want to live with someone else, especially not a stranger. After a week of posting ads for a roommate on various websites, I met Dante, who was the same age as me. Dante moved in with nothing but a single backpack. He was tall, very thin, with an expressionless face and eyes that always carried a constant look of exhaustion. After taking a tour around the house, we discussed some essential details about living together. Everything I brought up, Dante agreed to without a second thought. He had only one issue he wanted to discuss with me up front. I often sleepwalk. I wonder if that will bother you. I used to sleepwalk myself and had to undergo treatment for a while. Moreover, we have separate bedrooms, so I comfortably replied, "That's not a big issue for me." Having an additional person living with me wasn't as inconvenient as I had imagined. We didn't have the same schedules, so we didn't run into each other very often. The house also felt less empty. One night, I jolted awake when I heard Dante screaming loudly. I hurried to his room to check on the situation. "Are you okay?" I called out loudly while knocking on the door, trying to drown out Dante's screams. But immediately, he stopped screaming, and everything fell silent again. I tried turning the doorknob. He hadn't locked the door. Looking into the room, he was still asleep, as if nothing had happened. He must have been sleepwalking, I thought, and went back to bed. A few months later, everything went back to normal. I noticed that he didn't have any family or friends. In the several months he's been living here, I haven't seen anyone visit him. He also didn't have any phone calls with anyone. That's what I observed. He also didn't go out for leisure. He only went to the supermarket to buy some essentials and then returned home. One night, Dante screamed loudly again. This time, I ran over, opened his door without calling out first, but as soon as I opened the door, everything felt eerily silent, and he was still sound asleep. In the following days, everything went back to normal. One night, I jolted awake in the middle of the night. In the corner of the room, a tall, thin figure stood staring at me with lifeless eyes. I sat up, screamed loudly, and quickly turned on the light. "Dante!" I exclaimed in an irritated tone. "What are you doing in my room?" He didn't answer, standing still like a statue. I walked over and gave him a firm pat on the shoulder. Dante woke up, and after realizing what was happening, he repeatedly apologized and went back to his room. I couldn't go back to sleep. The image of Dante in the darkness kept playing tricks on my mind. Wait a minute, I clearly locked my door. Realizing this anomaly, I raised a big question about him and started to be more cautious. In the following nights, I couldn't sleep well.
I had trouble falling asleep, kept waking up suddenly, and felt as though I was being watched. One night, I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m. Not long after, I jolted awake when I heard a noise that sounded like a door closing. I sat up, turned on the light, and looked around the room, but didn't see anything unusual. I walked over to the door, placing my hand on it with suspicion, and my heart was pounding. I turned the doorknob and was shocked to find that the door wasn't locked. But I swear I checked the lock at least 3 times before going to bed. Looking at Dante's room across the hall, a sense of tension and exhaustion overwhelmed me. I felt regretful for having found a roommate. I needed to have a clear conversation with him to find a solution. The next day, I left the house feeling extremely exhausted. The mountain of work that needed to be done left me drained. Returning home at 6 p.m., I collapsed into bed and fell asleep immediately. The screams rang out again, but it was very close, very loud, with a tone of pain and anger. I thought if I kept being pushed into such a state of panic and fear, my heart would eventually explode. I fumbled around, unable to find the light switch. Panicking and extremely scared, I also screamed loudly, joining in with the screams. Finally, the light was turned on. It was Dante, standing right behind my bed, hands holding the knife. His face was fierce with his eyes rolling wild, his mouth agape. All came down upon a scream. I stood on the bed, huddled into the corner of the room, my heart racing as if it might stop. He suddenly collapsed, kneeling on the floor with his head bowed, still holding tightly onto a knife. Minutes passed, and I didn't see any further reaction from him. I grabbed my phone, hurriedly fled the room, went to the garage and drove away. After driving a good distance away from the house, I checked the clock and saw it was after 3 a.m. I decided to sleep in the car and parked in the local church's parking lot. At 8 a.m., I drove back home. I guessed that Dante would be awake and that I would need to talk to him. But Dante was gone. He had moved out during the night. I called him, but couldn't get in touch. 2 months later, my lease ended. While cleaning up the house, I discovered a box in Dante's room. Inside there were many photographs of me sleeping, each one clearly dated. A key. I used it and opened my bedroom door. Sleepwalking might be causing Dante to behave in this disturbing way. Because he woke up in time that night, Dante stopped before he could harm me. Feeling guilty and embarrassed, he left. It's also possible that sleepwalking is just an excuse for him to carry out some evil intentions. Afraid that I would call the police, Dante quickly escaped and left behind this box. Regardless of the situation, I thank God that I am still safe. I have moved to another state, but what happened with Dante still haunts me every night. The secret behind Dante's actions remains a frightening mystery that I do not want to explore further. The notes and diary I found in the forest led to one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. I'm Benny, 35 years old. I love traveling to different places, discovering new things, and documenting it all. I have a YouTube channel where I share my real experiences with people who have the same interests. Over time, my hobby turned into a passion, and it even started helping me make some extra money. Last fall, I took a trip to explore a forest that's about a 4-hour drive from where I live. I planned to stay in the forest for a night or two and brought all the gear I needed. By the time I got to the forest, it was already late afternoon. There was still a bit of weak sunlight, just enough for me to look around and find a spot to settle for the night. The forest wasn't super wild or dense. From what I could tell, a lot of people had been there to explore before.
I saw names carved into the trees, along with some water bottles, plastic bags, and leftover fast food boxes. As I ventured further into the forest, I spotted a few interesting things under a white oak tree. There were scraps of paper wedged with small stones at both ends, and they had personal notes written on them. The water bottles and flat stones were covered with song lyrics, and there were a ton of them. I felt curious and a bit intrigued, so I skimmed through everything that was written. The handwriting was kind of scribbled. There were a few cigarette butts left behind, so I figured this must have been a guy. The scene was pretty fresh. The pieces of paper were still white, and the handwriting hadn't been damaged by rain or dew. He must have left not too long ago. While looking around, I found another bag under the tree next to me. Inside was a thick red liquid, mixed with some chunks that I couldn't tell if they were meat or something else. A smell of decay hit me, and I thought it was coming from the stuff in the bag, until I saw a duck head with a long neck decomposing right next to it. An electronic device was in pretty bad shape. I figured it had been smashed with a lot of force. At first, I thought it was a smartwatch, but when I tried it on, it was way too big for my wrist. For a moment, I thought of a device used to track the behavior of prisoners after they're released. It's worn on the ankle. I tried it on and it fit my ankle perfectly. I found another notebook a few steps away, picked it up, and saw that it was in perfect condition. It was getting dark really fast, and the rustling sound of dry leaves startled me. I quickly left before I ran into any other dangerous animals. I found the perfect spot to spend the night, a small wooden house. After checking, I didn't find any belongings or items left behind by the previous person. I took out my stuff and started getting dinner ready with confidence. After I finished eating, I pulled out the notebook I'd picked up earlier to read. A notebook looked pretty ordinary on the outside and didn't have the owner's name on it. As I flipped through the first pages, there were scribbles and a few random sentences about life. Mike Jones, prisoner at San Quentin State Prison, released on May 30th. Reading that, I immediately felt a shiver. I knew this Mike. He was reported by the media and police in California to have died over a month ago, right after getting a 15-year prison sentence. He was a pervert with 13 charges, including violence, theft, and attempted murder, but he didn't succeed. Mike talked about what happened during his sentence, how he was beaten by other inmates, and how many times he tried to end his life, but failed. My nerves were on edge when I realized the handwriting in this notebook was similar to the handwriting on the pieces of paper and plastic bottles from earlier that day. So, I had accidentally wandered into the territory of a dangerous person. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and I was startled. My heart was pounding like crazy. I didn't answer or open the door. I just sat quietly, listening and waiting to see what would happen. After about 10 minutes, I slowly opened the door and looked outside, but no one was there. On the ground was a plastic bottle with a note that said, "Get out of here now. I saw you." I had just received a threat and a warning. It wasn't clear if that person was Mike Jones or not, but who knows what they might do next. On top of that, I don't have any weapons to defend myself. I quickly packed up my stuff and left the forest that night. I hoped I wouldn't run into any more trouble. Luckily, I got out of the forest safely and found a motel to stay in. Right after that, I called the police to report everything I'd found and sent them the video I had recorded. The next morning, I drove back home. That afternoon, I saw on the news that Mike Jones had been found and arrested by the police. He was sent back to prison because of his defiant behavior. Since then, I haven't had the guts to explore the forest again. It's a place with a lot of cool things to experience, but there are also potential dangers that can be hard to handle. The story is based on a true event about a YouTuber's scary camping trip, He really loves nature and has a passion for exploring new places. He recorded his trips and experiences and shared them on YouTube for people who have the same passion. After that scary evening, the young man gained a new perspective and learned to be more careful and alert on future trips. An incident happened that made me swear off running at night for good. I'm really into exercising and playing sports, but since I spend most of my day working, running at night seems like the best option. In an evening, after wrapping up a ton of work, I grabbed a quick snack, changed into my running gear, and headed down to the park below my apartment to blow off some steam. The park was empty at the time, but suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I instinctively turned my head and was startled to see a tall, dark figure running behind me. I started running faster, and my heart was racing, out of control. But I could feel the person behind me getting closer and closer. My mind started racing with all sorts of worst-case scenarios. The more I ran, the faster I went, all flustered and panicked, with my heart pounding so hard it was tough to breathe. Not daring to turn around, I glanced to the side and saw the person's dark shadow falling onto the road right next to me. There was a couple being intimate up ahead, so I didn't hesitate to run over and shout for help. The girl in the beautiful white dress got up and walked over to me with a surprised look on her face. I gasped, turned around, and saw someone in a tracksuit running past. "Are you okay?" the girl in the white dress asked, looking worried. Now that I looked closer, she was really beautiful. She must have been on a date with her boyfriend. I gave a shy smile and thanked her. I curiously looked toward the boyfriend, but his face was hidden in the darkness, so I couldn't see him clearly. I thanked the girl again and left. Deciding to wrap up my jog, I was shocked to realize that my phone was missing. I froze for a few seconds trying to remember, and then realized I must have dropped it while trying to escape from my pursuer. I immediately ran back the way I came to find my phone. After searching around but still not finding it, I suddenly remembered the smartwatch I was wearing. Following the signal from the watch, I headed to the children's playground. But I had never run to this area before. Moreover, it was darker than the other areas. The playground equipment looked eerie and distorted in the darkness, creating strange shapes. The wind whistling through the dried branches, the chirping of insects, and even the weird sound of footsteps echoing in the dark. All of this turned what was usually a fun and lovely area into a place of horror and fear. I checked the signal on the watch again, and it definitely showed it was here. As I got closer to the playground, I heard music playing and was relieved to have found my phone. After wandering around the slide and seesaw for a while, all I could hear was the music from the phone. I turned around to look at the two swings a few meters away. I screamed in surprise, my heart racing and my head spinning. Someone was sitting on the swing on the left. "Who is it?" I said, my voice trembling like I was about to cry. That person didn't answer. The swing kept moving back and forth, the chains creaking, and the sound of water droplets slowly dripping made my legs feel weak. It looked like a girl in a long dress, but her back was turned, so I couldn't see her face clearly. My phone rang, and it was coming from that girl. She must have picked it up. "I dropped my phone with the pink case. Have you seen it around here?" The silence was still there, and it was haunting and unsettling beyond description. I slowly approached the girl. The phone rang even louder. Suddenly, the phone fell to the ground with a loud clatter, breaking the eerie silence. My whole body jumped. I quickly ran over and grabbed the phone right at the girl's feet. Holding the phone in my hand, I didn't have time to feel relieved. The phone was covered in a thick fishy liquid. I was hit by that horrible smell for a few seconds. Looking down at where I'd just picked up the phone, I saw drops of water still flowing down, and the girl didn't react at all. I trembled, turned on the flashlight on my phone, and shined it toward the girl. She had tears all over her face, neck, and chest, and her eyes were wide open in panic. Her red dress was soaked, and each drop of liquid slowly flowed from her feet to the ground. It was the girl who had been with her boyfriend earlier. I ran as fast as I could, putting all my strength into it. I knew I had to get out of there quickly because that murderer could still be nearby. When I got to the security room, I collapsed and quickly told them everything in 2 sentences. The security guard and I stayed in the room until the police arrived. I told the police everything that happened, especially about that tall man. He was the top suspect in the case, but unfortunately, I couldn't see his face clearly. But on the flip side, he knew my face very well. He also knew where I was and might be lurking around. I asked the police for round-the-clock protection. I installed more security cameras, alarms, and a more modern door lock system to make sure everything was safe. For 2 months, I lived in fear and confusion and hardly left the house. By the 3rd month, the police announced they'd caught the guy while he was hiding in a neighboring state. I moved in with my parents because I felt scared and panicked whenever I was alone. I avoided all dark, dimly lit areas, parks, and even playgrounds. I nearly got myself killed on my 19th birthday because I was being totally reckless. I am James, 30 years old. My scary experience went down 11 years ago. For my 19th birthday, I grabbed my 2 best buddies, Jim and Julian, and we decided to check out this old abandoned campsite in the woods. We decided to start exploring around 10 p.m. and figured we'd wrap it up before midnight to celebrate my birthday. With my immature mindset back then, I was super pumped, thinking this trip was going to be an awesome adventure and make me feel cooler than ever. The reason I knew about this campsite was because I went there when I was a kid. I came back there the week before and found out it was totally abandoned. That's why I wanted to check it out again. But I didn't expect it to be such a bad idea. After dinner, my 2 friends and I drove out to the campsite. Since we were all on the same page with our thoughts, opinions, and interests, we were totally pumped for the challenge we'd set up, laughing and chatting the whole way. About a mile from the campsite, we had to stop the car because a wood log was blocking the road. When we got out of the car to see what was up, we saw that the wooden beam had private area carved into it. I swear I didn't see this when I came here last week. I was quite surprised. Jim and Julian were really intrigued and even more curious. Just a few steps from the wooden beam, there was a triangular warning sign. We shined our flashlights on it and read, "Beware of dangerous dog." Jim suddenly burst out laughing and said, "What a joke!" Julian and I were a bit surprised at first, but then we got interested. We decided to leave the car and just walk into the campsite. Jim was walking around with his flashlight, and I had my phone out to record the whole cool adventure. We ventured deep into the forest, but before we got too far, we started hearing dogs barking in the dark. We stopped and exchanged glances. I whispered, "There really are dogs." Julian was pretty sure, saying, "I bet there's not just one, but at least 3. Our reckless curiosity made us more excited than scared, so we decided to push on further. We'd barely taken a few steps when a woman's loud scream freaked all 3 of us out. The scream was both angry and sad, and it was really haunting. "Turn off the lights," Jim whispered, and Julie and I instantly followed his lead. I could hear my heart pounding really hard. "What the heck is wrong with her?" I said. The scream stopped, so we waited a few more minutes, then turned the lights back on and kept going. The vibe got really tense, so we stopped talking and just stayed quiet. Out of nowhere, the woman's scream came back, this time way louder, like she had moved closer. We looked at each other, totally confused, turned off all the flashlights again, and just stood there listening. About 2 minutes later, we saw another flashlight shining from the other side. Not being able to make out who was in front of us, we just stood there in a daze, waiting for them to get closer. Jim turned on the flashlight, aimed it at the person, and said, "Hi." But what we saw froze all three of us in place. It was a woman in a white dress. No clue who she was. But what really freaked us out was the big axe she was holding tight and pointing right at us. We turned around and bolted as fast as we could, using every bit of alertness and speed we had left. As we ran, we screamed for our moms and for God. The woman was super fast. She chased after us and yelled, "I'll kill all of you, you assholes!" We ran in a panic and got separated in the dark. After running for a bit, I turned off the flashlight, hid in the bushes, and kept praying. Hearing Jim's scared screams and the dog barking, my heart just sank. With my hands shaking, I grabbed my phone to call the cops, but it felt like it was weighing a ton. After waiting 10 minutes, which felt like forever, I finally heard a police siren. I couldn't get up or move because I was too scared that danger was still out there. "Is anyone here?" a police officer called out loudly. I quickly turned on the flashlight to signal him, and they took me back to the car. When I saw Jim, my best friend, covered in cuts and bruises, I started crying. Julian was lucky to be okay, but he was totally crushed. The crazy woman kept screaming and fighting the cops, and it took 3 people to take her down. That night we were taken to the hospital. Jim had to be rushed to the ER because of blood loss, and Julian and I just got a general checkup. The next morning, once we were feeling a bit better, Julian and I were called into the police station to give our side of the story. After checking out the abandoned campsite, the cops found a bunch of stuff used for pagan rituals, 4 German mastiffs, and a lot of animal carcasses. The woman was arrested, and they started looking into it further. It took Jim 3 months to bounce back, both physically and mentally. We haven't done any more wild challenges since then, and we've realized that being reckless is like messing with your own safety and life. This story is based on a real event involving a Belgian YouTuber's experience. On December 29th, 2023, he and 2 friends drove into the forest to check out an old abandoned campsite. Their recklessness almost got them into serious trouble, and it ended up being a huge psychological shock.
Ryan and I have been close friends ever since I was 7. We used to be neighbors, and we were very mischievous. When Ryan and I were 16, our appearances were truly strange. I had piercings in any spot I could, wore bright neon colors, and had long hair that covered most of my face. Ryan, on the other hand, preferred a rather slick look, having all his hair and eyebrows shaved, and wearing tight-fitting clothes. At the age when many psychological changes occur, we became even more disliked in the eyes of everyone in the neighborhood. Not a single family was unaware of our bad reputation, nor any of them had ever escaped our bizarre pranks. However, we would only take things as far as playful teasing, with no intention of hurting others or engaging in criminal activities. Let's see what game we'll play today. According to the list, which house should we go to? I discussed with Ryan. The house at the end of the street just had new people move in, Ryan said. Is it that abandoned house? I asked, surprised. Let's go check it out. We were both really excited. The abandoned house at the end of the street was forgotten, but Ryan and I loved it. We even called it our secret base. It was true that someone had moved in because the front door had been replaced, and the surrounding area had been tidied up. Ryan and I approached and knocked on the door after curiously surveying the house. The door slowly opened, and a woman appeared. She had pale skin, sunken eyes, and a completely expressionless face. I guessed she must be in her 60s. "Hello, ma'am. We live in this neighborhood too. You just moved in, right?" I confidently greeted her. "What is it?" Her voice was so cold that I shivered, and there was a very unpleasant smell. I was stunned, staring at her face until Ryan nudged my arm gently. We have a small gift to welcome you," I said, presenting a small box. The woman stared at it for a moment before taking it, and the unpleasant smell returned as she said thank you. Ryan tugged at my shirt, and we quickly left. We peeked outside the gate to watch the woman's reaction to the gift we had given her. She opened the box, and a toad jumped out, but contrary to our expectations, she remained completely calm. "What? Is this the first time we failed?" Ryan exclaimed, surprised. "Did you smell that really awful odor earlier?" I asked Ryan, who looked at me puzzled. Ryan and I turned our gaze back to the woman. Both of us froze as we watched her stuff the creature into her mouth and chew ravenously. "Elton, did you see that?" Ryan's voice trembled. I didn't answer. We could both clearly see the frog's hind legs still swaying in rhythm with her chewing. I pulled Ryan away, both of us silent with our own thoughts. Eventually, we agreed to keep observing that woman. The next day, after school, we watched her again, but from a different angle. It seemed like she lived alone. After a while without seeing her, we were about to leave when we heard a noise. The woman had returned. It turned out she hadn't been home all this time. She was carrying a large sack, but she was surprisingly agile, which is unusual for someone as old as her. Whatever was inside the sack seemed to be moving. However, it didn't seem to interfere with the way she swiftly dazzled between places. "Neither of us would be able to move it, Elton," Ryan whispered. "I've told you before, she's all but normal," I muttered. But the surprises just didn't stop there. The woman went toward the backyard of the house, pulling out a healthy, living chicken from the bag. Ryan and I both understood that the bag was filled with chickens, and there must be dozens of them inside. The chicken struggled violently, flapping its wings wildly, its beak screaming in fear. The woman, without a moment's hesitation, gripped the chicken tightly with both hands, and suddenly bit down deeply into its neck. The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Hot red blood splashed out, flowing down her face and hands. The woman's mouth was full of blood, red patches of raw flesh between her teeth. She chewed voraciously, the wet crunching sound echoing in the still air. The chicken was still alive, writhing in pain, its eyes wide with panic as life slowly drained from its body. Ryan's lips trembled slightly. He seemed desperate to say something, but couldn't get the words out. I swallowed hard. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, my hands gripping Ryan's so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Cold sweat rolled down my forehead, each drop falling onto my face, merging with the thick, suffocating atmosphere of fear. We wanted to look away, but we couldn't. Our eyes were glued to the scene of the crazed woman, ravenously gnawing at the chunks of the chicken, while our bodies trembled, on the verge of collapsing under the weight of the horror overwhelming us. Ryan's backpack dropped to the ground, cutting through the eerie atmosphere like a knife. The woman turned towards us, her gaze like a jolt to the brain, snapping us back to reality. Ryan and I ran without pausing to grab our backpacks, our hands tightly clasped together. When we got to Ryan's house, His parents saw our frantic state and thought we had just gotten into trouble again. Both of us hurriedly recounted the incident, but all we got in return were annoyed expressions from Ryan's parents. We stormed back into Ryan's room. "Are you saying we should go back to that creepy woman's place?" Ryan exclaimed when he heard me mention wanting to figure things out. "Your backpack is still there," Ryan, helpless against my convincing reasoning. That evening, we arranged to conduct our investigation after dinner. Ryan's backpack was still there. There was a faint sound of crying, but loud enough for me and Ryan to hear. We exchanged glances, searching for the source of the sound. From inside the house, the woman emerged, still carrying a large sack over her shoulder. She set it down in the yard, slowly removing the outer layer to reveal a trembling little boy around 5 or 6 years old. Immediately, I grabbed Ryan, holding him tightly with one hand while covering his mouth with the other. With a sudden motion, she grabbed the child's wrist and yanked him toward herself. The baby screamed in fear, but the scream was quickly muffled as her bony hand tightened. Her fingers dug into the child's skin. She leaned close to the baby's face, smelling the scent of the soft skin, her eyes sparkling with madness. "Fresh meat," she muttered like an evil curse, her voice mixed with crazy laughter of someone who had completely lost their reason. Her hands clawed and her mouth opened wide as if preparing to tear the baby apart. Ryan and I shouted loudly, rushing to pull the baby out of that crazy woman's clutches. The brawl quickly got everyone's attention. They quickly arrived and called the police. The woman tried to run away but was stopped. She emitted a smell that made everyone hold their breath. The police showed up to control the woman. Inside her house, countless pieces of bones, meat, and other animals were found trapped and rotting. She was taken to a mental hospital after the police and doctors concluded that she had a mental illness due to living in isolation for a long time. No information or identification documents of hers were found. After only 2 weeks, she escaped from the hospital and disappeared. Although the police's conclusion was due to illness and circumstances, I thought that woman was like the reincarnation of Satan.
I once accepted help from a demon. I am Grace, and I have 2 little kids. One evening over 2 years ago, I was driving to visit my mom in a neighboring town with my kids. Due to work obligations, I set off quite late, around 9 p.m., and planned to stay overnight at my mom's house. At that time, my eldest daughter was almost 2 years old, and I was 7 months pregnant with my second son. As I drove on the relatively empty highway, I started to notice a car behind me. "It has been following me for quite a while, hasn't it?" I mumbled, then focused on driving. After driving a bit further, the car behind me began to honk and flash its headlights. I thought they wanted to pass, so I moved a little closer to the shoulder. But the car continued to stay behind me, constantly honking, which was really annoying. After about 10 minutes of this, my nerves frayed, and I pulled over to the side of the road. The car stopped right behind mine. With a mother's protective instinct, I checked the locks on all 4 doors, quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. A tall man was looking into my car and signaling for something. He was talking while pointing at the back of my car, and when he saw I wasn't reacting, he gestured for me to roll down the window to talk. I observed his demeanor, my mind racing with thoughts. Should I call the police? Does he need help? Seeing a sincere and trustworthy demeanor from the man, I rolled down the window just a bit, enough to hear what he was saying. "Do you need something?" I asked, sounding quite cautious. "Oh no, I just wanted to let you know that the left rear tire of your car is wobbling continuously. It's very dangerous." His demeanor and tone were very sincere, and I began to feel more at ease. I must have overthought this, I thought to myself. I got out of the car to check the rear tire, but I didn't see anything unusual. I also had no expertise in vehicles. But I felt everything was fine while driving. I looked at the man and asked. "But I'm afraid it won't last much longer," he replied quite confidently. "Let me call roadside assistance or the police." "Thank you so much," I said while pulling out my phone to dial. "There's no need to waste time like that. I can help you." The man quickly interrupted me. "It's a simple issue. Just tighten the wheel." Seeing that I was still hesitant, the man continued. "I worked in a garage for a few months. This is a simple task. You seem to be in a hurry, and you have young kids with you, right?" My daughter woke up and unexpectedly called for me, and the situation completely convinced me. After about 15 minutes, the man announced that my car was fine. "Thank you so much. What's your name?" "No problem at all. I wish you a peaceful evening." He smiled, waved goodbye, and walked away. I thanked him once more and continued on my journey. But just after I drove a short distance, I started to feel the wobbling of the tire. The more I drove, the more the car shook, leaving me extremely anxious, while my daughter clung tightly to me and began to cry. I stopped the car again, got out and checked. "What bad luck," I muttered in frustration. A car coming from the opposite direction stopped. It was the man from earlier. "Is something wrong again?" he asked, concerned. "Well, the condition of the car is more serious. I think I need to call... I must have messed up somewhere. I'm really sorry. Let me take you to the nearest gas station for help." "Oh, no, thank you, but it's okay. I also have a part of the responsibility for your car." I decided to decline, but he didn't give me the chance. Once again, I was convinced. He politely opened the passenger door for my child and me. From that moment on, my 2 children and I officially faced the demon. After about 10 minutes of driving, we reached the nearest gas station, but he didn't stop. Instead, he accelerated and sped past it. He remained silent in response to my questions, his face cold and different from the friendly demeanor he had before. I began to feel a sense of fear. I quietly took out my phone, knowing I had to escape and call the police. Suddenly, a strong force yanked the phone from my hand, and I gasped and screamed. "Shut up! I'm not sure I can stay calm. You and your 2 children will soon meet God. Wait until I'm done playing." Each word he emphasized made me feel like I was turning to stone. My breath quickened as I held my daughter tightly, feeling my son kicking forcefully in my belly. I had to find a way to protect myself and my children. After nearly an hour sitting next to the demon, a heavy silence enveloped us as he drove faster and faster, my heart racing to the point of almost breaking. I quietly scanned the sides of the road in the rearview mirror, my body nearly drenched in sweat. At that moment, I quickly opened the car door, curled up tightly around my daughter, and jumped out into the road. Thank God for protection. My daughter and I landed on the shoulder with soft, grassy ground. My daughter burst into tears, and I held her tightly, unable to get up just yet. I heard the car slow down and then speed off. I knew we were temporarily safe. I checked my daughter's body, breathing heavily as I broke down in tears from the panic. I carried my daughter and ran to the nearest police station, reporting everything I had just experienced. The police quickly contacted medical personnel to check the health of me and my daughter. Looking at the sketch of the wanted murderer posted on the wall, my body suddenly went numb. Zodiac. He was the one who wanted to kill me. Immediately, the police requested to block off the roads that the murderer might take. By the time we reached the spot where I left my car, it had been burned to ashes. He had erased all traces. I was affected by the jump and had a premature birth. But fortunately, I was still able to care for and witness my 2 children grow up. I was placed under police protection and moved to another state after giving birth to my son 6 months later. This story is based on a true event related to one of the cases of the Zodiac, one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. The victim was a woman named Kathleen Johns. She arrived at the police station in a state of extreme panic, pointing at the sketch of the Zodiac on the wall and exclaiming, "That's the man who just tried to kill me." Kathleen was an incredibly fortunate survivor. To this day, the true identity of the self-proclaimed Zodiac killer remains a mystery. It is impossible to know the exact number of victims who died at his hands.